Hey everybody, welcome back to the Nidus Anarchy series. I'm your host Adam, CIO and co-founder of Nidus, and today I have Riley Hughes, the founder of Trinsic and the Future of Identity podcast, which is pretty awesome, talking to another podcaster. Thank you for coming on. Your company is actually pretty awesome. I'm pretty excited to get into the weeds with you. But before we even jump into all that, why don't you tell me a little bit about Trinsic, Future of Identity, and just yourself and how you got into this?
Yeah, well, thanks a lot for having me. I'm excited to chat. Uh, Trinsic is a company. We're building the first identity acceptance network. So what that means is we help companies verify their users using digital identities the users already have, as
Mhm.
opposed to using uh, uploaded photos of physical ID documents, which is the sort of status quo in the identity verification world today.
Yeah.
And I got into the space because it just seemed kind of bizarre to me that we're sending people to outer space and we're catching 20 stories tall rockets with, big metal chopsticks, and we're, using AI to self-drive our cars and write all our blog posts. And, we have all these incredible things happening in science and technology, and yet proving like something so fundamental as like I am actually Riley Hughes requires me to photograph a plastic card and upload it to some third-party company server to be processed. That like, and I don't know where that goes, and it's just very it seemed like that was wrong and that it would be better in the future than it is today, right? So I thought, this is in 2017 where I got into the space
Okay.
and just sort of thought, um, the future is going to be better than it is now, and I don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but I would, like to try to play a part in making that happen. So that's why I got into the space. And today, the thing that motivates me is, I can go basically anywhere, online or in person, as long as I have a Visa card and
Mhm.
walk out with stuff, right? Overseas, near shore, online, whatever. And it's basically a universal payment instrument. And that's sort of the future I envision for identity, where, in short time, I want to be able to go anywhere online or in person and be able to easily prove who I am with something I already have, as opposed to needing to sort of re-upload all these documents over and over and over with each service separately to prove who I am.
Right. So with that, um, and I'm going to ask you a lot of questions here, just more of like for the general audience. Obviously, we work at the identity space, so we're kind of familiar with how this stuff works. But in your analogy there, you're saying like with a Visa card, you can walk in, you can buy things and walk out. It's pretty simple. It's like we don't have to do all this crazy stuff anymore. And now, obviously, which I'm sure you're probably going to go with the analogy is tap to pay. You can just do it on your phone. You don't need the piece of plastic anymore. You can do everything right from your phone.
Yep.
So the big question is, if my Amex gets stolen, the number gets stolen or lifted, or whatever, they just send me a new card with a new number. How do I get a new identity? If I can't, how do I prevent that from happening?
Yeah. Well, it's worth maybe doubling down a little bit on how the Visa network works, um, because I think it's analogous here. So Visa doesn't, issue you credit. They don't give you the credit or the capital to be able to spend when you swipe that card. That credit comes from a bank. Visa essentially enables we everyday people to use credit from any bank to transact with any merchant, right? And that's really what they enable. And the sort of um, thing that I envision for identity online is not that we will have some single master database of everybody's identity, no single blockchain that like possesses all of everybody's personal information or anything like that. I think the world will be a little more decentralized, fragmented, fit for purpose, right? You might have an ID that is used in the travel space, maybe with Clear or something, and you might
Mm.
have a different ID that's used, if you're a veteran with ID.me or something like that, right? There will be different identity systems for different things. But what we hope to enable is, again, allow you to use whichever ID you already have to transact for whatever you're trying to accomplish. So in short, if you're if you have a mobile device with a mobile driver's license on it, and some hacker gets into your iCloud account or your Google account and sort of tries to hack your phone or something,
Yeah.
well, then you are going to be calling Google or Apple and trying to recover it that way, or you're going to be going through the same things that you would do if you were hacked today.
So basically, it's the same
But
as if someone just photocopied an old school, like made a fake ID with my face and name on it and was running around trying to be me. You just have to. It's the exact same problem. You're not trying to solve the problem. You're trying to solve the efficiency of day-to-day use
Yeah.
of, which is way more important and way more prevalent.
Yes, and if somebody wanted to do what you're describing and create a fake ID for you, they should just go on the dark web and buy all of that data for between $5 and $10, and they could probably do it today very easily. So that's not really the core kind of thing, like you say, that we're solving. We're
Yeah.
trying to make it easier for you to, you know, prove who you are when you need to do so.
So I noticed like one of the big selling factor, at least from looking through your website and reading some of your papers, and what seems to me is the most obvious one is that you're an initial step before doing identity documentation verification. So all these tools like Ping Verify and ID Me and all these guys that say, okay, scan your passport, do the face scan, and do all the things,
Yep.
takes time. Not everyone has their passport or driver's license laying around with them all the time, especially when they're trying to do something quick. It's going to be costly to the person, like because the company has to pay every time they're doing that identity
Yep.
verification. So you want to be that initial step of, hey, check with me first, because maybe it's already registered. Maybe we can do this without having to redo all the long, expensive parts again.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You know, it sort of we are a known we have a known place in the funnel, right? So normally when you open a credit card or a bank account or something, the bank or the marketplace like Airbnb or whatever the case may be, they have what they call a waterfall where they're
Hmm.
first going to try to verify you as easily as possible, ideally without asking you for documentation. And it's only if those sort of passive checks or whatever don't pass, like maybe you got a new phone or maybe you are in a different state that looks fishy or something like that, and they want to make sure it's really you, then they will step you up to a now upload your document to prove that it's really you. And
Yeah,
we sit right in between those two things, you know, right in between the passive and the very, very, very involved steps as a sort of intermediary
that's
stepping
smart. You're
stone, if you
basically
will.
identity verification caching.
Yeah, yeah. If your identity verification has already been done and cached by one of these trusted services or on your in your Samsung wallet on your phone or
Hmm.
whatever, right? Then we essentially allow you to use your cached identity at more places, right?
Nice. So, what are the backend systems that you work with? What are kind of the top tier providers for these identities that already have the IDs cached, if you will?
Yeah. Yeah. So if you go in our dashboard today, you'll see 27 identity methods that are live, and we expect to have another probably up to 35 before the end of the year. And that represents about 100 million people.
Wow,
Now, it's possible some people have multiple IDs, right? So I don't know,
of
maybe,
course.
maybe not
So
100
it's
million
100 million
unique
IDs.
people. It's 100 million IDs, yes.
Got you.
And that's
Okay.
across the US and Europe primarily.
Okay.
And um, some of the big names that we work with are in North America, the company Clear. They have about
Mhm.
25 million IDs. So if you uploaded your passport at a kiosk to get through the TSA security line faster, you know,
Yeah.
they will create an account for you, and then later you can, you know, reuse it through our platform. And then mobile driver's licenses are the other big one. So a lot of states have their own MDL
Mhm.
solution, their own state app. Other
How many
states work
states are
with
doing that
Apple,
right now?
Google. There's 15.
Oh wow, that's a lot more than I thought.
Yeah, 15 are live, and another 15 have announced that they will launch. And we expect about 10 of those to launch in 2025.
Oh
So,
wow. Okay, so
but by
it's
the end of
definitely being adopted
2025, we
quick.
think, well, I think by the end of 2025, about a little over 60% of the US population will be eligible or have access to a mobile driver's license.
Mhm.
Um, Now, I don't think 60% will go download it, right? I think that
Right.
these things take time to get adopted, but there are certain states like Louisiana and Colorado with reasonably high adoption. There are other states like New York and California, which are growing very rapidly. California just did a press release yesterday that announced that they'd done 1.3 million. They'd issued 1.3 million mobile driver's licenses, and that's over the course of 6 or so months. So
So, if if I have a mobile, if let's say I'm in New York, I do not have a mobile driver's license like tied up anywhere. I honestly did not know I could even do that until you just told me. So that'll be
yeah,
the
yeah,
first thing I do as soon as we're done here is I'm going to go play with that and figure that out real quick. But I think
yeah.
the first thing that comes to my mind is like, okay, I'm going to have digital ID. Who's using it or who knows how to accept that? Like if I get pulled over by the cops and I'm like, I don't have my driver's license, but I got the one on my phone, are they cool with that? I'm sure it's state by
Uh,
state and probably precinct
it
by
is state by
precinct, I would
state.
imagine.
Yep, it's state by state, and of course, I heard this analogy of it's like shimmying up a chimney, right? You get a little bit on the one side, and then you
Yeah.
kind of got to get a little bit on the other side, and then a little bit on this side. So for me, I first encountered the Utah mobile driver's license aside from my, job in this industry where I
Yeah.
sort of, it's my job to kind of know about these things. But, I saw a little sign in the TSA line or whatever that said, hey, next time get your ID, your Utah ID on an app on your phone, right? And that was the first time I saw it. And I downloaded it there and used it at the TSA, and it was like, okay, cool. And then another time, I uh, forgot my wallet in my car when I was going to a happy hour or something, and they were trying to ID me. And I said, "Oh, well, I actually have this on my phone. Do you accept this?" And they're like, "No, we don't. You got to go get your ID."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Okay, that's expected." But the next time, the same thing happened. And by the way, friends who know me know that I forget my wallet. I don't keep my wallet on me a lot. Uh, Same thing happened again. Forgot my ID, and I asked this different place. I'm like, "Oh, any chance you accept this thing on the phone?" And they said, "Actually, yeah, we do. Let me scan it." And she scanned
Hmm.
it, and she's like, "Great, green check mark. You're in." And she didn't get all of my information from my driver's license, like my home address and my weight
Yeah.
and my, all these other details that she doesn't need. Um, she just got a green check mark that says over 21. And
Nice.
I went into the happy hour and I was like, oh, interesting. Well, I wonder where else I could use this. And
I see
so
you
I think
attend
it's
a lot
going
of
to go a
happy
little bit
hours.
like that. Yeah, yeah. It's gonna go a little bit like that, right? Like you're gonna encounter something in the wild. Some places will support it, others won't.
Yeah.
Others will ask you if you have it, and then eventually, consumers, as they get accustomed to it, will begin to adopt these things more and more.
Yeah, I feel like it's like tap to pay. Like when that first came out, and as soon as I could get my one of my cards into my phone, I was like, "This is amazing." And then it was like, "Cool, you could use it everywhere." And I live at the time when that came out, I was in New York City, living in Manhattan. I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna go use this." And there were like three places that took it, and pretty much
Yeah,
everyone said no. I was like, "Come on, but you got the thing." Like, no, we don't do it. It's like, oh, but nowadays I just realized like I really don't pull out my card unless they just for some reason they don't take Apple Pay, but pretty much everyone does now. So it's just
yeah,
I think we're going to see probably that natural progression of like just like you said, where eventually everyone's going to catch on that this is just easier, quicker, and less liability. So I think people will probably want to adopt it as quick as possible.
yeah. And
So
you may know the details of this better, but in the tap to pay example, I believe adoption
mm,
really accelerated because of some incentive change or some liability change with regard to um, like swiping the card or whatever
yeah,
had a different liability model than a tap to pay because tap to pay is more secure. So the
yeah,
card networks and the issuing banks were more willing to
yep,
take on the liability for that, and which incentivized the merchants to then adopt it. And I think a similar thing will happen with mobile driver's license because physical IDs, you can print a fake one, like you say. You
yeah,
can, photographing them, and then do it taking a selfie and then trying to match the face that you took 10 years ago on the ID to the face that's here now on the image, which now has a beard and sunglasses
yeah,
on or something, like is like very much not foolproof. It is very, very hard to get that right. It's very, very hard, especially now when you
oh,
layer in the
my
fact
wife does
that you
not
can,
look like her driver's license at all.
yeah, yeah, well, especially if I don't know if you've tried to make a deep fake of your wife's face and tried to compare it to the driver's
Oh
license or
yeah,
something, but that makes it even harder, you know?
yeah,
Um, Whereas if you have a mobile driver's license, it's cryptographically signed by the issuing entity,
hmm,
and you can instantly verify the provenance of the cryptography against the issuing body's public key, and you can know right away that it's authentic. Um,
yep. So two
so
things.
yeah,
So first, the credit card thing, the way that that became more secure is because it's actually it's a rolling code. So every time you make a purchase, it's not actually using that number with that expiration date and that security key. It's a think of it like a one-time use credit card number for every single purchase. So even if it were intercepted on the fly with some crazy man in the middle attack, it wouldn't be reusable. So you wouldn't be able to replay it. It's like the old movie pass. It's basically you're saying, "Hey, I want to buy this thing for $10." It goes, "Okay, cool. You're approved to spend it for $10. Here's your number." It signs everything on the phone, and then it creates that purchase. And it says, "Okay, this number is good for this $10 for this particular purchase right now." So
yep,
that's and like you said, because it reduces fraud so much and ease of use, everyone started adopting it pretty quickly. So
yep,
for the adoption rate, so now back to like the driver's license thing. Now I don't have mine. I don't have the New York one, but another big reason I think adoption took up is because of the Apple Wallet and the Google Wallet. It's built into the iOS. It's built into the OS on the phone.
Yeah.
Now, is what about mobile driver's license, mobile passports? I don't think that's built into the phone, is it? I don't know about Google, but I don't think it is on the Apple side.
Um, so
You would know better than I
there's
do. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a complicated answer. I mean, I could go into the specific states that support different things.
Hmm.
And like for example, Google supports mobile passport, but it is not like issued by the State Department. It's like they
Okay.
use the chip in the passport to like
Oh,
NFC the
yeah.
details into the thing, and then they sign it so that it's like theoretically a digital passport or it's a digital representation of your passport or whatever. Um, Apple Wallet supports 8 states. I believe that New York is not one of them. So if you want to get
Okay.
your New York mobile driver's license, you need to download the app from the App Store
From New
from
York.
the state of New
Got
York.
you. Okay.
So it's a very fragmented landscape, and all these different apps prove the ID or present the ID differently and have different features and things. And so this
There
is
isn't
sort
like
of
a
part of
standard
the
that's from this.
yeah. There's theoretically a standard, right? It's primarily a standard upon yeah, it's like you know. It's yeah, there is a standard. Absolutely, there's a standard. Now, the degree to which each different app supports that standard and the degree to which that standard applies to the presentation of the ID
Okay.
is a little bit it varies. And also the degree to which companies, comply with the standard upon issuance of the ID also varies. So um, it is a very fragmented landscape. It's part of why we exist as a company because it's hard to make sense of all this that's going
Hmm.
on in real time. Um, but I will say that, relying parties, what we call them, the equivalent of merchants, right? Companies like Capital One or Airbnb or something that would normally want to accept, IDs from people to verify their identities. Um, they all want mobile driver's licenses, and it's just obvious, right? For
Right.
all the
Oh,
reasons we
for sure.
described, it's just such a better experience than uploading a physical document.
So when you sign up for the mobile ID, are you doing an ID verification check with like the facial recognition and all that kind of stuff? How's that? Can you? What's the kind of that sign up process? What's the general sign up process? Maybe I should say.
Yeah, in general terms, and again, they're all different, but in general
Right.
terms, you need to essentially prove that you have the ID, the physical ID, which
Okay.
usually means upload photos of the document. You need to do a selfie match and a liveness test to make sure that
Okay.
it's a live version of you, not a deep fake. And then generally they are taking those details and they're matching it to both the biometric and the attributes about you in the DMV database. And if the DMV confirms this is all the same stuff that we issued to you 7 years ago when you got your, when you issued the ID, then they will generate a digital credential on their end, sign it with their private keys, and then send it back to your phone and let you hold that digital artifact, that digital representation on your device in whatever wallet it's configured to go to.
So I have, I think, like three different phones. Would I be able to have my digital license on all three phones, or they limit it to one per identity?
Again, the degree to which companies comply with the standard varies, but the idea is that you would be able to have it on one device.
Okay. So I couldn't have my New York license on two different phones.
I don't know specifically about New York, but
What about Utah?
for Utah, you can only have it on one device. Yeah.
Okay, so it'll kill it on the next one, or it won't allow you to do it until you relinquish it
Yeah,
from the other one or
that's
something.
right. So
Okay,
if I were to download it on a new device, I would get a pop-up or whatever on my screen that would say like, this it's no longer on this device or whatever.
interesting. Okay, cool. Yeah, and I see the security benefit for sure because then otherwise people could just use it everywhere. But from a
Yep.
convenience factor, it's like from the back to the credit card. It's like, oh crap, I don't have that phone with my ID, and I've effectively left my ID at home again, even though I have my phone.
I know. Yep, it's true. Yeah. Yeah, there's all these
Cool.
trade-offs, but yeah.
So from a okay, so let's get back to Trinsic and how you're actually doing this kind of the lookup. So if I'm Airbnb, let's say, and I want to validate a user, and I accept now the mobile ID of some kind, um, and I hit up you. So my first API call, I'm mentioning it's just an API call, some type of REST call or something. I'm going to make to your backend to your servers, and I'm going to pass in what type of information do you receive in to start that cache check. I'm just going to call it the caching. I'm not sure what if you have right proper terms, go for it. But
Yeah, I mean, there's really two ways that Airbnb could do this. The first way is that they could use our widget. So we would sort of take over the user experience
Hmm.
And we would essentially say, um, hello, Adam, we need to verify your identity. Here's your options. Option one, upload a physical ID document and take a selfie. Or you can use one of these IDs that you already have. And then below that, we would show a list of options, right? A
So
list of
how do
buttons.
you know who I'm Adam? How do you, like, if I'm John Smith, how could you differentiate that between all the other John Smiths that you could possibly find?
Well, sorry. So we wouldn't know that your name is Adam or John Smith at that point. We would just say, hey, we need to
Person.
verify your identity. We need to learn who you
Okay.
are. You can either upload an ID or use one of these identity wallets you already have. And then you'd see Samsung Wallet, Clear,
Hmm.
Yoti, Airside.
So if there's
You'd go
50 of
down the
them,
list of all these.
do you
Yeah.
do you have to pick out of the 50? Is that the idea? So as you keep onboarding endpoints, does that basically make that
Yes.
drop down longer? Okay. Got you.
Yep. And then, of course, that is the default. So I want to anchor with that. And then obviously, it's no surprise that that user experience is not going to be great. Like you don't want to scroll through a list of 50
Right.
things and be like, "Whoa, what are they?
Yeah.
I don't recognize any of these or whatever." And at that point, we're depending on your ability to remember that you have one of these things and
Right.
opt in and
Yeah.
choose it. And
This
so,
screams decentralization is a need.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so then the other thing we do, so our company sort of does two things. Number one, we aggregate all these sources into one place. And number two, we try to optimize the user experience to get the user through it as quickly and as easily as possible. So there are a number of things Airbnb could do to optimize that. First thing they could do is if they know that you are in New York, they probably won't show you the Portugal, Estonian, Swedish, or French uh, EID methods, right? Probably going to show you the ones that are relevant to you. And we have tools and APIs that allow them to pass in certain parameters, and we will respond with
Hmm.
our recommended sort of list that they show you. And then we can do that recommending, right, and that tailoring in that list for you as well. And then the second thing that they can do is one of the parameters that they can send us is a phone number, and from phone number we can deduce certain information, basically, area code.
Hmm.
We could get IP address, we could get other things as well to try to get a better idea of which where you're coming from and which identity methods might be relevant to you. We could get your operating system, right? So if you're on a Samsung phone, we could show you the Samsung Wallet, for example. But we wouldn't show you Samsung Wallet if you're on Apple. Those sorts
I
of
always
things.
love this stuff because imagine, like, I remember, internet like 1.0 is brutal, but like I think about this a lot, and you're touching on this topic, which is we spend as developers and and entrepreneurs developing systems to be as efficient and streamlined as possible for the end user, to where they have to do the minimal amount of work as possible to get to that endpoint, right? Like, it's
Mm.
we want that click through rate to get all the way with the least amount of hops and the least amount of stuff. And we're spending, like, I would have been, you probably spent tons of time and effort and money and banging your head on the desk and error handling to make that as efficient as possible, just so they don't have to scroll down and try to find something.
Yep. Yep.
It's it, that's to me, that's a sign of a great company, because it's, if you're not trying to make this as efficient and easy and for the user and as intuitive as possible, the adoption rate just is going to be too difficult, I would feel like.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I agree.
so how is this from? So speaking of adoption, how what's like your company's growth? How are you seeing the adoption of Trinsic into workflows of identity verification over the years?
Yeah. So we've been around for 5 years as a company. And we've been doing this particular thing that I'm describing to you. We had a launch in mid-September
Hmm.
on this, and then we went to Identity Week very shortly after, which is where I met others from
Yeah.
your team. And so it's early, but the response is very, very good. I can tell you that we are like I'm having to go cancel half the other things on my calendar and just like scramble to keep up with it because it's just so obvious, right?
Yeah.
So I mean the biggest challenge we have, and I'm always just really transparent about here's what's working, here's what's not. I mean, the biggest challenge is just it's almost like we're going to a e-commerce company
Hmm.
that already has a checkout flow and a payment flow that works. Right? Type in your credit card details, whatever. And we're going to them and saying, hey, you should add this Apple Pay button to your checkout flow.
Right.
Because for the 5% of people who have it, it's going to be a better experience. They're going to get through faster, less chargebacks, less returns, whatever. And the e-commerce company says, that's an absolute no-brainer. We will absolutely do that. And, we could do it tomorrow. We could also do it in 6 months. I don't know. We'll do it when we get around to it.
Yeah.
Um, and so what we're spending a lot of time on right now is doubling down on those use cases that are more where there's more urgency and more of a
Mm,
sensitivity to friction and drop off in the funnel.
mm.
And there's some really interesting, use cases where the drop off when a user needs to upload an ID is really quite high. And and those are the ones that are sort of responding best. And then I think as we, continue nailing, those key use cases, then we'll be able to expand into the subsequent ones more over time.
How have you been doing in the crypto space? Because I would imagine, I mean, they're doing KYC, AML stuff like crazy everywhere because of, audits and SECs and stuff like that. Are you seeing them more interested, or not say more interested, but they're just interested in this type of tech? 'Cause I would think the quicker they can get you verified to get your money, the happier they'd be.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you're right. In the crypto space, there's a lot of ideological alignment because you can think of us like a wallet connect for KYC or something, right? Like,
Right.
and that
Yeah.
little phrasing is like people are like, oh yeah, I kind of get that. Especially because I mentioned, out of the 35 identity methods that we'll have by the end of the year, maybe 20 or 25 are government issued identities, another 5 or 10 are private sector reusable identities, and then another 5 or 10 are self-sovereign identity wallets or crypto wallets, which have done KYC and saved it as like an SBT or a verifiable credential or something to a wallet that the user has. So, um, and we would love more of those, right? We would love to add more decentralized identity methods into the product as well. The challenge we tend to have with those is that they're geographically very dispersed, right? They're like have users from all over the world as opposed to other
Right.
methods that are more discreetly kind of like this is the French identity method, which is much easier for, as you can imagine, if Airbnb is like we want to start verifying people in France, it's easier for them to kind of
Right.
point to, oh, that geography, let's turn that one on for this geography, than it is for these decentralized identity methods. But I think that's the future, especially because the user experience for some of these things is much better. The privacy and the ability for users to self custody and control their own identity is something I think people will increasingly want over time. So I'm really excited about the space and would love, if there are folks in the crypto ecosystem that, you know, uh, want to
Have you
connect, I'd love
have
to
you talked to
explore it further.
Coinbase or Kraken at all?
I have talked to probably most of the household names that you can imagine, and
Okay.
yeah, yeah,
Okay. Cool.
yes,
Good. Are you seeing any traction? Are they interested? I would imagine they should be. If they're not,
yeah.
they're stupid.
Like like I say, I think the question is never, is this a good idea or something, right? I mean,
Mhm.
it's like it's safe to say that we've learned that what we're doing is that it has definitely has product market fit from like this is a no-brainer perspective. And like I said, the challenge we run into is just timing and prioritization and where does this fit on the roadmap and where does, you know, um,
Gotcha.
other sort of logistical hurdles, but it's definitely working well and uh, uh, you know, yeah, like I say, it's sort of a no-brainer.
Cool. So one question I did have, when I was looking at the website, is it I think rate like I don't know if it's above the fold or not, but it says there's 2.5 billion people using digital credentials. That's half of every adult in the world. I don't know anyone that has a digital credential. Where are these 2.5 billion people? Is it China? India?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, the reason we put that on our website is because most people like you are surprised by it. It's a little bit of one of those things that you read and
Yeah,
you go, "Wait, what?" And those kinds of things are always good for marketing, right? It's good, captures the
absolutely.
attention and gets you thinking
I
about it.
really started
Um,
reading after I saw that.
yeah, yeah. And yeah, the short answer is I am like you, right? Like my peers, the people around me are very, very similar. But there are some countries with big populations that have national ID schemes that
Sure.
help with that. India, Bangladesh, Philippines, Indonesia, really,
Gotcha.
Kenya, right? Like you take like 5 countries like that, and you get pretty close to the 2.5 billion number. And
Yeah.
then when you add in, you know, um, There's 20 some European EID schemes. In the US alone, there's over, I mean, you may not know of people with a government issued, you know, mobile driver's license on their Apple Wallet, but you may know of people who've had to do their tax returns and got an ID Me account, or
True.
people who
Okay,
have a
gotcha.
Clear membership, or people who
Yeah,
flew on United Airlines and got the Airside app, which has a reusable digital identity component to it.
gotcha.
So
Okay.
when you take a broad enough view of what a digital ID really is, and you can include these government databases with biometrics and PIN numbers and things, and you also include private sector apps and products, then the number gets surprisingly big.
Nice. So the last thing I wanted to just touch on was the Future of Identity podcast that you put on.
Yeah.
Looks like that's going pretty strong as well. How's that been going for you? Are you having fun with it?
Yeah, I am having a ton of fun with it. We're a few dozen episodes in. The focus of it is, like I say, when you look at 2.5 billion users with these digital ID systems, that's very surprising to people. And it's also surprising that, like, why isn't everybody already using these things to verify people? Why do we still have to upload photographs of plastic cards to verify ourselves? This just doesn't make any sense. And so the short answer to that is because the space is very fragmented. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of methods. That 2.5 billion is spread across lots of different, very fragmented and complicated landscape. So the podcast is meant to highlight what is going on here. What are these things doing? So we've had people from ID.me, which is the largest private sector reusable ID network in the US. We've had people from the California mobile driver's license, or DMV, the Louisiana DMV, right? The places like this. We've had people from Europe, from MasterCard, from Microsoft, from big companies that are driving these reusable identity initiatives, and just trying to highlight what is it, what's going on, um, uh, really, right? Like, how does the product actually work? And some of the key questions around
So
that. So it's very niche, but
that question is your
it's been a
key
lot of fun.
question. How does it work? So I think the biggest thing, which I know we got to wrap up. So what's the best way for people to reach you to find out how is it going to work for them? Like, what's the next step for people that, because I know people are going to watch this and they're going to be like me and be like, okay, I got to see how this fits into my workflow. So how should they reach out to you? What would be the best way for you?
Yeah, I suggest I'm on social, Twitter or X, at Riley Hughes or Riley P Hughes, and then LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn as well, and I post a lot of the kind of things we learn about the landscape there on LinkedIn. And then my email is just my first name at my company's domain name. So Riley at Trinsic.id. And yeah, would love to connect with anybody
Awesome.
who's interested in chatting.
Cool, man. Looking forward to it. And I'll be watching your next episodes of your podcast as well. I've already watched a couple. They're pretty good. I like it.
All right, good. All right, appreciate it. Well, thanks a lot,
Awesome.
Adam. It's
Thank
great
you, man.
talking to you.
Appreciate it. Have a good one.
Yeah.
Nidus has just created the first iOS app made exclusively for identity management professionals. It's called Nidus Breachcast, and you can download it now. It's amazing. We have real-time updates of all the latest breaches that are occurring, CVEs as they come out real-time, really pertaining just to identity management. We have media that's going on this podcast. We're going to be bringing in a lot more others as well. And we even have a complete vendor list of all the identity management vendors and all their products, so you can find out exactly where to download their software, all the documentation. And what's even more awesome is an identity management glossary. All those crazy words and acronyms that we can never remember, they're all listed in there for you. No ads, just pure information to make your life simple.